All right, guys, good morning. It is 8:11, so we will go ahead and get started with the pledge.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Make it a great one. Go Bulldogs.
All right, so as we here with our warm-up, make sure that you take note on the board here. Next class will be our first test. So our Unit 1 test will be on Tuesday. Your study guide for the test is available in Schoology under the Unit 1 folder, and it's been there since the beginning of the unit. So you can use your vocab and all of your notes to prepare for that test. You can also feel free to come to office hours, either one of our office hours on Monday if you have any questions or you want us to look over your study guide. That would be a good choice, or send us an email. So we'll give you about 6 more minutes here on the warm-up. Make sure that you copy the question and the objective into the form. And if you're done with your warm-up, pull up your Unit 1, Day 3 notes. All right, these warm-up answers look awesome. Pretty much everybody got that Virginia was established as a business venture. Jamestown would be an acceptable answer too. Jamestown was in Virginia. Remember that the southern region was the region that came to the New World for economic opportunity. So perfect, good job on that. Okay, go ahead and make sure that your Unit 1, Day 3 notes are out. Some of this is going to be a little bit of review for the test with a little bit of new information, not new information, but details about what we've already talked about. Go ahead and get out those notes real quick and we will get started. All right, so we're going to look at life in the 13 colonies. So remember, and I think I showed this map last class as well, that this is what North America looks like in 1700. The red area on the map here is going to be the 13 colonies that we talked about last class. New England region, middle colonies, southern colonies. The green area on the map is going to be French land, and the orange areas on the map are going to be Spanish land. And it's important to review that because we're going to see in our next unit some conflict between these three monarchies, Britain, France, and Spain, over land in North America. Okay, so to review, New England had long, cold winters, and the geography was not good, so it was difficult to grow food in that region. So instead, people in New England used trees to build ships. They made money in the shipbuilding industry. And they also used the Atlantic Ocean for fishing. The New England colonies are coastal, meaning that they're next to the Atlantic Ocean on the coast. So New Englanders could eat the fish that they caught, and they could also use that for trade to make money. Religion is going to be the most important part of life in New England. Remember that most New Englanders at first were Puritans who had come to North America for religious freedom, and they had a very strong belief in hard work. However, they were not tolerant of other religions. Yes, Jason, go ahead and give you audio so you can ask a question. Yes. Yeah, for sure. And this is also posted. So remember, all of the PowerPoints are posted in case anybody misses anything. But yes, I'm happy to go back. Okay, Jill, I will go ahead and send that to you in the chat when we start our classwork. Remind me, okay? Okay. All right, so the Puritans were not tolerant of other religions, so that can be kind of confusing for students because the Puritans come to the New World for religious freedom because they weren't allowed to practice their religion in England. But then when they get here, they're not tolerant of other religions. So, yes, thank you, Divion. So people who do not follow the Puritan faith ended up being banished or kicked out of Massachusetts, and they started some other colonies. Our most famous is going to be Roger Williams. He starts the colony of Rhode Island for other people who were considered dissenters, and that was one of your vocab words. Dissenters, people who were other religions, who were not welcome in Massachusetts. Okay, so dissenters are not so much welcome in Massachusetts, so they start other colonies, most famously Rhode Island. The politics of New England. New England had a democracy. All men who were church members participated in what they called town meetings, where every single church member voted on every single issue. We call that direct democracy, when every single person has a vote on every issue. They called themselves a covenant community, which meant that they agreed to live together and create a government based on their religious beliefs. So a lot of vocab in there, right? We have democracy, covenant community. Mayflower Compact was the document that they created that said this was how they were going to live and govern themselves. When we move on to the middle colonies, the weather is going to get a little bit better. So our soil is a little bit better for farming. We had people who were subsistence farmers. Remember, that means that they grow just enough food to feed themselves and their family, not to sell. So they also make some money through manufacturing. And the middle colonies had a lot of rivers. So they were able to trade between other middle colonies by putting things on boats and traveling along rivers. The middle colonies are the most diverse. So we have people coming from all regions, Germany, England, Holland, and we not only had different ethnicities, we had a lot of different religions in the middle colonies. So the Quakers settled in Pennsylvania, Huguenots and Jews in New York, Presbyterians in New Jersey, and they believed in religious toleration. So unlike the Massachusetts Puritans, who were kind of haters and did not let other religions settle, the middle colonies believed in religious freedom, respecting other people's religious beliefs, having a bunch of different religions. The society in the middle colonies was flexible. We have a middle class. Middle class people are like everyday business people. We call them artisans. Artisans are people who have a specific skill, like you see in the picture. This one, her skill is making shoes. Blacksmiths, cobblers, things like that. So small businesses and small farmers in the middle colonies. The politics of the middle colonies were also a democracy. So we're going to see examples of democracy in all three regions. And then when we become a country, our own independent country, obviously we become a democracy as well. In the middle colonies, people chose representatives to make decisions for them like we do today. I think I gave you the example of choosing like a mayor or a senator or a president. We don't all vote on every single issue that comes up. We have representatives who make those decisions for us. But unlike New England, where only church members had a say, and unlike the South, where only rich people had a say, in the middle colonies, everybody had a say. So Virginia and the South has the best climate for farming. So they make money through plantation agriculture, which means farming on really big pieces of land, growing what we call cash crops, things that are grown and sold to make money. Those cash crops, anybody remember what those cash crops were? Can you give me an example in the chat of some cash crops? I think we talked about pork. Corn could be a cash crop. Tobacco was the biggest. Tobacco was the biggest in the South. What were the other ones in the South? Anybody remember? Yes, TJ, cotton is huge and will become the biggest cash crop over the next couple hundred years. So tobacco, cotton, there were two more I think that I mentioned. Anybody remember? Yes, rice was one of them. There was one more that started with an I. Indigo, beautiful, yeah. So indigo is a plant that produces like a purple color, and people used it for dye, like to dye cloth. So perfect. You guys remembered all those cash crops. That's beautiful. So the cash crops were grown and sold to other colonies and also sold to England. Remember that the South needed people to work on these farms. These rich businessmen were not going to get dirty and get down on the ground picking cash crops. So at first, they used indentured servants to do the work, which were other immigrants from Europe. So poor Europeans who had their trip to the New World paid for in exchange for working for 7 years. But eventually, the South turns to the use of slavery to make even more money because slaves weren't paid at all for their work. Remember that we had a little bit of a division in the South. So the good land on the coast was used by these rich people for farming, but the not so good land, like in Western Virginia, the mountain area is going to be where the poorer people live. They have really small farms. They hunted and traded to make money. But the South is founded on this belief of private ownership of property, owning as much land as you could to make as much money as you could. We call that free enterprise. Okay, so the South is all about making money. In the South, people came from England and belonged to the Church of England. Were coming again to make money, not for religious freedom. These people still have ties to the Church of England, which was the church where they came from. So they have the closest relationship with the king. In Virginia, people had to pay taxes. Their government that was established first in Virginia was the House of Burgesses. The House of Burgesses is a representative democracy. So landowners, the rich people, got to vote and choose representatives to make decisions for them. But the people who had the most power in the government in the South are going to be the people who own the most land and have the most money. Remember, in Virginia, you had to own 25 acres of land to even be able to vote. Now, this is a little bit new. The Great Awakening is going to be a religious movement that happens in the colonies. So remember that religion was a factor in all of the colonies. In New England, we had Puritans coming for religious freedom. In the middle colonies, we had people settling in different colonies based on their religion. In the South, people were still religious. They belonged to the Church of England. So the Great Awakening is going to be a time of big change in religion. So at this time, religion is pretty old school. We have really big churches reading a lot from the Bible, things like that. The Great Awakening is going to change religion to a focus more on good behavior, being a good person instead of just memorizing the Bible. We wanted church to be relatable for common people so that common people could understand. So this was a big change in religious traditions, and people start to question how church worked before. And when they start to question church, they start to question the government too, and have a lot of new ideas about how they should have more of a voice in their church, and they should have more of a voice in their government. So the Great Awakening, this change in religious tradition, will also change the government. And we will talk about that next unit, but this is just a little bit of a start with the Great Awakening. Again, slavery is going to be a huge way for the South to make money. Slavery starts in the colonies in 1619 when the first Africans are brought here against their will. It's important to know that. This is not voluntary. Slavery was a system where basically people were kidnapped in Africa, brought over on ships on a very dangerous trip across the Atlantic Ocean where many didn't even make it. A lot died to work on tobacco plantations and eventually cotton plantations. And again, this is really only happening in the South. The North is making money through shipbuilding and making things by hand. Excuse me, the middle colonies are opening businesses. It's the Southern colonies that are really engaged in agriculture that depends on slave labor for them to make all this money. So slaves are brought to America because of the plantation-based agricultural economy. What that means is because we had all this huge amount of land that needed to be farmed, these landowners are so greedy that they don't want to have to pay for people to work. So this is cheap, free labor on a large scale. We start with indentured servants and then eventually move to the use of slavery. Okay, so it's important that we understand the difference between slavery and indentured servants. Indentured servants volunteered. They know what they're signing up for. They're agreeing to have their trip paid for. They know that they're going to have to work for 7 years to pay back that trip. These are Europeans, white people who are choosing to come to the New World. They know that they'll get their freedom in the end and be able to start a new life. Slavery is nothing like that. Slavery is not voluntary. Slavery was a lifelong servant position. So very important to understand the difference. Okay. So again, that voyage that I mentioned where people were brought from Africa to the New World was called the Middle Passage. So the Middle Passage was the trip where slave owners went to Africa, forcibly took people, put them on boats, brought them to the southern colonies to work as slaves. This was a very inhumane voyage. You can see how people were packed into these ships. not allowed to really move, not allowed to use the restroom, barely given food. So many of these people are going to die or become extremely sick on the Middle Passage, the trip from Africa to the southern colonies. Once they get here, they are sold to plantation owners in the South. And then from there, every single member of your family is owned by that same plantation owner. So there's no escape from slavery. It's a lifelong, and then not only lifelong, but continues on with your children and your children's children and your children's children. And the United States is going to be the last developed country in the world to get rid of slavery. So it's an extremely difficult thing to talk about and to learn about, but it's important to learn about because it's a huge mistake, and it's obviously a huge wrong that this country engaged in for hundreds of years. Okay, so the slave trade is going to be what we call part of the triangular trade route. So slaves were traded almost like goods, things. So you see we have products being moved from these areas, things like raw materials, sugar, cotton, tobacco, things that are grown on plantations are shipped from North America back to Europe. And then other manufactured goods are moved from Europe down to Africa. And then on the third route from Africa to the New World is where we see slaves being moved on the Middle Passage. Questions? So some of that was review and some of that was just a little bit more detail on things that we already covered. And that's our last set of notes for this unit. So what we're going to do first today is we're going to have a quick quiz, but it is totally open note. You can use your notes to complete the quiz. It will be a summative grade. So when you go into Schoology, into Unit 1, Day 3, you will see Unit 1 open note quiz. So you can go ahead and complete that now. It does need to be completed before we leave for the day. When you're done with that, and let me share my screen so that you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so I'm in the Unit 1 folder. Right here is your study guide for the test for next class. So that's something that you'll probably want to work on. We're not grading it. You're not turning it in. It's just for you, but we highly suggest that you do it because everything that's on the test is in that study guide. All right, so for today, I'm in the Day 3 folder. Here is the open note quiz. You'll want to complete that first today. When you're done with that, we're going to have you work on a quick poster. So what you'll do is you'll click this Come to America poster project. The directions are here. So what you'll do is you're going to create a poster. You can use Google Slides, Google Docs. You can draw it by hand and take a picture of it, however you want to do it. Choose one of the regions that we learned about, New England, Middle, or Southern colonies, and create an advertisement trying to convince people to come and move to the New World. So you're going to choose which region, that'll be your title, where you will live. So you want to list on your poster which colonies are in that region. So remember, a region is a group of colonies. The colonies are the specific, like Massachusetts, Virginia, New England, not New England, Maryland, South Carolina. Okay, what will you do for a living? So in that region, how will you make money? Why should people come? And then what warnings would you give people? What challenges might they face? Okay, so again, you can create that online or on paper and then just submit it as an attachment. So 2 things to do today, the open note quiz and then this quick poster project on paper or online. Any questions about what we are doing? Okay. If you want to work with a partner on the poster project, you can do that. You can work in groups of no more than 2. So as you finish your quiz, we will put you into breakout groups, and you can move around to get into a breakout group with a partner if you choose. Jason's calling dibs on Zoe. So for now, we'll stay in one big room, and then as you finish and submit your quiz, we will move you into breakout rooms and give you the opportunity to move yourselves. Okay? All right. So go ahead and start on that open note quiz. You can use all of your notes from the unit on that, and then you'll get started on the classwork. If you have questions, we are here. All right, we have about 50 minutes. The quiz should really take no more than 30, so you should have a good, and for some of you, you'll be done in 10 minutes. But you should have a good amount of time to get this classwork done, and this will be due on Tuesday as well. The point of it is not just to give you extra work, but this should be a good review for the test as well. So I would pick the region that you're the most, I don't want to say confused, but the one that you feel like not the most comfortable with. That way you're reviewing it more by doing the classwork. I wouldn't choose the one where you're like, oh yeah, I know everything about that one, because that doesn't really help you review. Okay? All right. I'm going to put the warm-up back for those of you who had an issue with that as you're working on the quiz and the classwork.